Hello, how are you doing? As wild as it may seem, the year is rapidly passing by. It's only late September, but I just saw my first Christmas advert the other day. Isn't that crazy? So I am taking stock of my reading goals for the end of the year before too much time goes by. And there are a number of big books that I want to read before the end of the year. And I find it really useful to set myself a TBR and plan for reading these books because with really long books, it's quite a challenge to actually get to them because they are so time consuming. And so I want to set out a plan for reading them. I picked five books, big books that I want to read before the end of the year. And I think of any book that's over 500 pages long as a big book. So I want to discuss all of these titles and why I'm so interested in reading them. I would love to know if you have read them, if you think they are worth the time that it'll take to read all of these pages, or if you're interested in reading them now, or if you have any big books that you want to read before the end of 2024. So to start off with, there is a novel by an author that I've been really anticipating called Our London Lives by Christine Dwyer Hickey. And this novel follows two Irish individuals who feel in themselves that they're kind of misfits, that one of them named Millie, she is a runaway and she goes to London to try to start a new life for herself. And then another Irish young man named Pip, who is a boxer and he has a lot of anger in him and he's prone to drink. And they meet in London and have a number of encounters over the years. Their lives seem to revolve around each other, and it follows them over the decades as they come together, as they separate, and following their different journeys. And it just sounds like such an epic story and kind of really great romance, but also a story about being estranged from one's homeland and trying to create a life somewhere else. And I'm also, it's very shameful, but I'm partly, the story sounds somewhat similar to me to the very like ridiculous romance of Far and Away about an Irish couple that go to America, starring Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. And I just rewatched that recently, and it's such a guilty watch for me because Tom Cruise's Irish accent is absolutely ridiculous in it, and I'm sure this novel is very different and much more poignant than that slightly more kind of like high romance story of that film. But yeah, it just slightly reminds me of that, and I'm partly so interested in reading this book because I loved the author's previous book, The Narrow Land, which I buddy read with BookTube's Sarah of Hardcover Hearts, and we had such a good time reading this novel, which follows the life of Edward Hopper, the famous artist, and his wife Jo Hopper, who was also an artist, but a much more frustrated artist, and also a boy that they come into contact with. That's kind of a neighbor of theirs, and it follows them over a period of time. This is such an excellent and well-written novel, and I'm sure this new novel will be as well. And also the inside cover of it is beautiful. I love how there's a kind of London scene, but also the scene of this couple and the pattern, which is like the tiles of like a doorstep. And so yeah, I'm so anticipating this book. And also it's been praised by Irish author Paul Lynch, the winner of last year's Booker Prize, who says it's told with a wise and benevolent heart. This is a London novel that captures the living moment of the city across the decades. Christine Dwyer Hickey is a national treasure. And it's also praised by author Colin McCann, who calls it a profound love story. So yeah, so looking forward to this. Now, the longest book out of all of the big books that I want to read before the end of the year is Familiaris by David Wroblewski. And this novel follows a man named John and his newlywed wife and their dogs and their friends as they move to the North Woods of Wisconsin. Wisconsin to start a new life for themselves. And it begins in the year 1919, and it's an epic story that involves history and philosophy and looking for meaning in life. And this was chosen as an Oprah's Book Club choice earlier in the summer. And but it's also a prequel to his previous novel, The Story of Edgar Sawtelle, which actually I haven't read. So I'm kind of debating about whether I should read that first before getting to this new, big, very long novel. But because it's a prequel, I think it might almost be more interesting to read this first. And if I enjoy the writing and the style of it, to then go read The Story of Edgar Sawtelle and see how the story continues, even though he wrote that book first. I don't know if you've read one or both of these books. Let me know what you think, and if you think the order is important, if you think it's better to get to that previous book before reading this new novel. But yeah, this is a very long book. It's almost 1,000 pages long. It's 975 pages long. So this will be a real commitment, but it's been praised by the author Richard Rousseau, who says, suppose you could do one impossible thing. John Sawtelle says in David Wroblewski's stunning new novel, Familiaris. What would you do? Clearly, what the author would do and has done is write this impossibly wise, impossibly ambitious, impossibly beautiful book. And it has also been praised, again, by the author Callum McCann, who seems to be blurbing a lot of books, and he calls it an American tour de force. So yeah, and I'm keen on stories about people that begin in one place and then just sort of pull up stakes and move somewhere else to start an entire new life for themselves, and that's kind of consistent with both books. So yeah, I'm looking forward to bunkering down with this novel. The Watermark by Sam Mills. This story sounds so ambitious and creative and thoughtful and just wild that I'm so tempted by it. It follows a couple who are fans of an author who is renowned called Augustus Fate, who has become a recluse. So they track him down and they go to visit him to see if he's working on a new book, and they discover he is, and he entraps them within his narrative. And so they follow through his a series of tales trying to escape from his story, and so they move through this tale which works through different time periods and genres, and so I think that's kind of represented on the cover of this novel, which is a London landscape, but also it's kind of you see bits of set in historical times, but then also in the future, and just like lots of odd things all jumbled together, and I'm just so keen to see how this story plays out and how this works, as it's a kind of fantastical tale, but also deals with a lot of real life issues and complicated subject matter. So the author Joanna Kavanagh says of this book, it's a thrilling and original novel, an existential mystery, a love story, an absurdist quest, a playful inquiry into ideas about freedom, fate, utopias, dystopias, AI, ethics, and where truth might reside in a world of fakes, richly imagined, wild, and wise. So yeah, if it pulls all of that off, I think it'll be an incredible feat. And I love a good, like, ambitious novel that tries to do so much like this, but can really yield some really great results. And I've read books by Sam Mills before. She's such an interesting and insightful author that yeah, I'm really keen to see how it plays out. The novel even goes into like a graphic graphic novel at some point, and so it departs from text to go into this like graphic novel format at one point, and yeah, so I'm so keen on that, and it's kind of a coincidence because my good friend Anna James wrote a whole series of young adult novels called Book Wanderers about how people can enter into the stories of classic children's tales, and but this feels like a much more like adult version of that, you know, dealing with much more like complicated subject matter. But yeah, so I'm so excited to read this. Collected Works by Lydia Sandgren, and it's translated from the Swedish by Agnes Broome. And this is the story of a trio of individuals. One is an aspiring writer, his very intelligent girlfriend, and their friend who is an artist. And this trio at one point was very close, but over the years they separate, they go their different ways. The girlfriend of the writer disappears, though they had children, and so she leaves him to raise their children. And it follows one of their children who then wants to uncover the mystery of what happened to her mother and where her mother went, but also the story behind her parents and their friends' life. And I think this sounds like a really poignant story, because I think, you know, we as individuals, we will, when we get to a certain point in our lives, we start to wonder about our own parents' lives and what their lives were like before, you know, we came into it, and start to try to piece together the mystery of that. And we can never fully know, you know, about what their life was like before us and the decisions they made, but we can't help wondering about that existence prior to us. And so I think this explores this in a really interesting way, and I like how it's like represented on the cover with all of these Polaroids, you know, of trying to piece together the story of one's parents. So yeah, this sounds like a really epic and interesting book, and I think Lydia Sandgren is very well respected and loved in her native Sweden. And finally, just for fun, I want to read a kind of joint biography called Erotic Vagrancy by Roger Lewis. And my husband gave this to me for my birthday. And this is the story of the epic romance between Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, the great actors who were a very famous couple, and they married, they broke up, they married again, and had a very, very tumultuous relationship, and made a number of films together, some of which are quite like wild and absurd. What's the name of that one that was written by Tennessee Williams, and it's like set on an Italian island, and it's just a completely like mad film that I don't think is very good, but it's also fascinating to watch. And also Elizabeth Taylor has amazing outfits in it, but also their film together, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, after the great Edward Albee play, is one of my favorite films of all time. And I just earlier this year watched Cleopatra for the first time, this really long, epic film that they made together. And I think that's the film that they first met on the set of that. And yeah, so they're just both like fascinating individuals, who are both really great artists, but also had really distinct and vibrant personalities, which sometimes really worked together with them, but obviously then had a lot of issues and a lot of breakups. And yeah, and I'm so keen, because I don't know all that much about, and I know a bit about Elizabeth Taylor's life, but I don't know all that much about Richard Burton's life. So be keen to learn a lot more about his life. And even though this is very long, I read in the introduction how the biographer Roger Lewis said that this book could be a lot longer, because there's a lot more information about them. And Stephen Fry is a fan of this book, and he says it's one of the very best biographies I've ever read. Magnificent, terrible, tragic, and triumphant. So I think this will be a real pleasure to read. I might save it for like the winter months as a kind of like, yeah, pleasure reading over that time. So those are 5 big books that I want to read before the end of the year. Like I said, I'd love to know if you have read any of these books, if you would also recommend them, or if you're interested in reading them now, if you want to read them alongside me before the end of the year, or if you have any big books that you are planning to read before the end of 2024. Let me know about that in the comments below. I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.